Well, that's one way to kill the vibes even more. My thoughts on the Mariners' awful 14-9 loss to the Cubs coming up. Let's talk about it, and then let's just throw this game in the trash.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
It is Tuesday, April 11th, 2023. This is Trident Gonzalez for the Locked On Mariners postgame show, brought to you by HelloFresh. Skip trips to the grocery store and count on HelloFresh to make home cooking easy, fun, and affordable. That's why it's America's #1 meal kit. Go to HelloFresh.com/MLB60 and use promo code MLB60 for 60% off, plus free shipping. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. Mariners lose in truly embarrassing fashion. No way around it. This was a disgusting, gut-wrenching loss to witness. 14-9, the final score from Wrigley Field. Cubs beat the Mariners. Cubs take this series over the Mariners, and we'll have a chance to sweep tomorrow afternoon with Marcus Stroman on the bump. We'll talk a little bit about that game towards the end of this show. But before we get into the negatives, because there were quite a few from tonight's loss, yeah, Colby's not here. We wanted him to be here. We were planning on him being here. But unfortunately, he's unavailable to record because he has a real job to be at. We just ran out of time to record together tonight because this game just went on for what felt like forever and a day because of the high-scoring affair, because of the awful pitching in this game. So yeah, you're getting a rare tie solo show because we did promise you a post-game show after this game, no matter what happened. And here I am at 11:49 p.m. on Tuesday night here in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I needed a few minutes to decompress before hopping on the mics here because I'm pretty spicy tonight, not gonna lie. And why the hell wouldn't I be? Because this sucked. This was terrible. This game was awful. I feel very similarly to the way that I did after that Mariners blow up in Kansas City late last season. I'm sure we all, unfortunately, remember that game. To me, playoffs aside, that was the worst loss of 2022 for the Mariners. And this game tonight it's very early, but the worst loss of 2023 so far for the Mariners, and it couldn't have come at a worse time because the Mariners really needed a game the way that this one was shaping up to look. After the first inning and a half, they were up 7-0. The bats were dominating. They forced Cubs starter Hayden Wesneski out of this game after an inning and a third pitched. Now, only 2 of their 7 runs scored were considered earned because there was some sloppy defense from Chicago, which was really nice to see considering the fact that the Mariners have typically been the ones with the mental gaffes so far this season. So it was nice to see some issues on the other end for what seems like the first time all year. I know it hasn't been, but it's been pretty few and far between. But don't worry, because the Mariners made up for that and then some. A little later on in this game, thanks in large part to Chris Flexen, who you could just tell from the beginning wasn't the same guy that we saw last Wednesday against the Angels. Even in the first inning, which was his only scoreless inning of the night, he threw 18 pitches, got ahead of a couple of guys, but wasn't really throwing quality strikes and had a really tough time putting guys away. But he did get out of it unscathed. But he gets a 7-0 lead, comes out for the second, and you could start to see it really unravel for Flexen. He allows the first 2 runners to get aboard, induces a double play, which did stop the bleeding a bit, but a run did come across on an infield single by Yan Gomes. Colton Wong tried to make a nice play up the middle, but Gomes outran the ball and was safe at first. But Flexen was able to get out of it. Mariners didn't score in the top half of the third, and then It all fell apart for Flexen. It was rough to watch because the guy just could not get anyone out. Just couldn't do it. He was missing the strike zone by a mile, and when he was able to find the strike zone, he was catching way too much plate, and the Cubs did some significant damage to him. Trey Mancini kicked things off with a 2-run home run to dead center. And you could kind of see at that point that 7 runs wasn't going to be enough for the Mariners because on top of Flexen's issues, the ball was also traveling really well tonight in Chicago. Fairly warm night in Chicago. Wind was blowing out towards the walls, which, of course, helped Eugenio Suarez hit his first home run of the season as well. But yeah, I wouldn't put all the blame on Chris Flexen, though. I know that sounds wild to say at face value, but that's because I, Trident Gonzalez, host of the Locked On Mariners podcast, am going to be critical of Scott Servais for the second night in a row because, you know, to be fair to him, he obviously found himself in a pretty tough position tonight, considering that the bullpen has been taxed over the last 2 games, and he really needed Flexen to throw innings tonight. But Flexen showed you who he was tonight very early on, and he proved to you that it wasn't going to get any better. It just wasn't. You could see it coming from a mile away. But Servais, as he's done time and time again in his Mariners tenure, waited far too long to yank him. He didn't even really get the bullpen moving until it was too late. And he ends up not pulling Flexen until the Mariners completely lost their grip of this game. You have a guy in Jose Rodriguez who you just selected the contract of, who hasn't pitched in a few days since his last time out in Tacoma, and is someone that can eat multiple innings and has done so down in Tacoma. And yeah, you don't necessarily want to put a guy in his major league debut in a situation like that, but you weren't going to get much better out of Flexen, and that proved to be the case here. It's just it's a bad decision on Servais. There's no way around it. And it reminds me of the second game of the season when, you know, Robbie Ray was really struggling against the Guardians, and, you know, as we found out, he was dealing with a flexor strain in his throwing arm, and he just could not find the strike zone whatsoever, and it was just not getting better. It was getting progressively worse, and his velocity was starting to tick down. And Servais still tried to push the envelope with him and had him face Stephen Kwan for a third time because of the lefty-lefty matchup, because that matters. And it came back to bite him. And this, once again, came back to bite him with his patience with Flexen, his undeserved patience with Flexen. Again, I know that you needed Flexen to chew up some innings tonight, but you just weren't going to win with him. And I felt that you found that out pretty early, well before it was 8-7 Cubs, well before it was even 7-4 Mariners. He showed you who he was going to be tonight, and you ignored the signs once again. And so, as much of the blame falls on Chris Flexen, it also needs to fall on Scott Servais tonight for that. And after that point, after they end up going down 9-7 entering the 4th inning, you know, Jared Kelenic follows things up with a home run. We're going to talk about Kelenic in a little bit, but this offense had its soul sucked out of its body. It was very clear. The at-bats, for the most part, were pathetic the rest of the night. And as much of a bad look as it is for the mental fortitude of this team, I also don't really blame them, because you put up 9 runs or 7 runs at the time. You should be able to win that game, and vibes are not really at a high right now. So for this team, so it's going to be easy for this team to kind of get down on itself. Now, you know, that could also be a little bit reflective of Scott Servais, who is widely regarded as one of the best culture builders in baseball, and I truly believe that. And I do think that Scott Servais is a good manager, even if just for that fact alone. There are a lot of in-game things that he does that I completely disagree with on a philosophical level. But also name me a manager whose fan base doesn't complain about him on an almost nightly basis. So that goes both ways. But again, Servais deserves a lot of blame here. Flexen deserves a lot of blame here. The bullpen deserves a lot of blame here because Diego Castillo wasn't good tonight. Jose Rodriguez, who ended up pitching after all, he ends up giving up 3 earned runs. Trevor Gott gave up his first earned run of the season after taking over for Flexen. Just wasn't a good night at all for the pitching staff, which, is supposed to be the strength of this team. It's supposed to be the thing that carries this team, not the offense, considering the way that the offense has been built. And that's a whole nother discussion. But the offense did its job, though, at the end of the day. I mean, well, let me rephrase that. It did what it needed to do in order to win a game, because when you score 7, 8, 9 runs, you typically win a baseball game. That's usually how these things work. But this was, of course, one of those rare, icky instances of blowing a big lead, which is going to happen once or twice every single season for every team, not just the Mariners. Every team has a night like this or a couple of nights like this every single season. It's just baseball. Weird things happen. Pitching staffs just kind of fall apart all at once. It is what it is. Doesn't make me feel any better, though. I don't expect that to make you feel any better at all. But that's just the nature of things. And hopefully, I mean, the positive spin on this, I guess, is hopefully they've gotten this out of their system now, that we're not going to experience another night like this season. Who knows? Maybe I'm speaking too soon. There is, of course, a long season ahead of us, as I've reminded you guys ad nauseum over the last week or so. But yeah, hopefully we don't have to go through something like this again. Fingers crossed. Now, let's all collectively push the bad vibes aside, because as a Eugenio Suarez would say, good vibes only. And damn it, I am going to make sure that you leave here at least on a little bit of a positive note. So we're going to talk about some of the positives from this offense, because again, you scored 9 runs. There are going to be some positives despite how tough this loss was. So we're going to talk about that in just a moment. But real quick, a reminder, this episode of Locked On Mariners is brought to you by So Rare. Our new sponsor, So Rare, is a revolutionary fantasy baseball game and marketplace transforming fans into owners with officially licensed digital cards featuring players from across all 30 Major League Baseball teams. Unlike other fantasy baseball platforms, So Rare managers truly own their fantasy experience, collecting, buying, selling, and competing with player cards against global opponents to win epic rewards. Win or lose, you still own your cards and there's no cost to play. Plus, the more you win, the more you advance, collecting increasingly powerful cards and accessing next-level competitions and rewards. MLB game weeks happen twice weekly and span a 3 to 4 day cycle, and at the end of game weeks, So Rare MLB managers who rank at or near the top of their leaderboards win a variety of rewards, which can include So Rare scarcity cards, game tickets, merchandise, signed jerseys, and VIP experiences like meeting MLB stars like Seattle Mariners center fielder Julio Rodriguez. Prizes may vary depending on the competition. Head to sorare.com/lockedon, that's spelled SORARE.com, to draft your team of free player cards, set your lineup, and start competing today to win epic rewards. Again, that's sorare.com/lockedon to start playing today. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners postgame show. Thank you again for making us your first listen after the Mariners' 14-9 loss in the north side of Chicago. And before we get into the positives, the few positives for the Mariners in tonight's loss, because like I said, there are some positives to go over, some really nice positives actually, including Jarek Kelenic. I want to tell you about something positive that we're doing over here at the Locked On Mariners podcast. Now, as I'm sure most of you who listen to us on a daily routine know by now, or on a daily basis. I don't know why I couldn't think of the word basis. It's now 12:41 because, just to make it clear, take a peek behind the curtain here. I've had some technical issues because it's the Locked On Mariners podcast. We're going to have some technical issues, but as some of you may know by now, we're running a little fundraiser with Feeding America, which provides meals to those in need. Food insecurity impacts 34 million Americans, with 9 million of those being children, and we're hoping to take a bite out of that a little bit here with this fundraiser. We initially set a goal of $500, which, thanks to the deals that Feeding America has with wholesalers, would equal 5,000 meals, 10 cents per meal. And we thought that was a pretty lofty goal, but you guys shattered that, which was incredible because you guys have been incredible throughout this whole process. And we are now, as of the last time that I checked, around 4,800, which is 48,000 meals. That's incredible. But we don't want to stop there. This fundraiser does not end until the end of April. So we have plenty of time to get us to 5K and hopefully to 10K, because as Colby has told you guys over the last few days, I have agreed to get a tattoo somewhere on my body of my choice, because I don't trust you guys to pick out the tattoo. I'm not giving you guys that much power. I don't trust y'all. But I will get a tattoo. And I'm leaning towards chills, which, by the way, I don't know if you guys saw, but Mariners PR tweeted the word chills today from their account. Just saying, just putting that out there. But I'm looking to put the word chills somewhere on my body if we get to 10K donated. So if you want to see that happen, go to our donation link. It's in the description of the show, whether you're watching or listening to it. And if you don't have the means to donate, you can still help out by subscribing to the show, because Colby and I are donating a meal per subscription that we get between the time that we started this fundraiser around opening day till the end of April. And we're going to be making that donation at the end of all of this. And so a subscription is pretty much just as good as a donation. If you're already subscribed, tell a friend, tell a family member, tell anyone you want to come subscribe to the Locked On Mariners podcast here on YouTube. And their subscription will essentially count towards a meal for someone that could really, really use a hot plate on a nightly basis. Using the word basis again. So with that out of the way, let's get to the positives of the Mariners tonight. And there's no other way that we can start this than by talking about Jarred Kelenic, who was once again sensational at the plate for the third day in a row. He goes 2 for 3 tonight with a solo home run in the top of the fourth inning to make it 9-8 at the time. That was incredibly impressive. I want to talk about that in just a second. He also had a double that almost cleared the wall, so he almost had a 2 home run night. He also had a couple of walks. And the really interesting thing about his double and the home run is that, and maybe this is a glitch on Baseball Savant, but I'm looking at it right now, and they both registered at the same exact exit velocity, which is a lot more rare than you would think, because they use decimal points. Like, these are very exact numbers. You don't typically see the same exact exit velocity in the same game, let alone from the same player, but they have both the double and the home run at 107.2 miles per hour. It's crazy, right? As for the home run, a 94 mile per hour fastball on the bottom outside corner from Michael Rucker, I believe his name is. Yeah, Michael Rucker. And Kelenic drives it to one of the deepest parts of Wrigley Field. Kind of left center, almost dead center. Just a ridiculous home run from Kelenic, which friend of the show, Jason Churchill, Prospect Insider, said is the most impressive highlight of Kelenic's career. And I tend to agree, because Kelenic isn't doing that with that pitch last year. He's just not. We're seeing growth. This is growth. That's exactly what we saw tonight. We saw Jarred Kelenic do something that he just straight up wouldn't have done if this were 6 months ago, 7 months ago. It's incredibly impressive. And this is now going beyond what he's done with regards to plate discipline. he's doing special things with the pitches that he should be doing special things with. We're really seeing Kelenic's talent come to fruition here right before our eyes. He's now hitting 333 on the year with a 1041 OPS here in the early going. Obviously, very small sample size. I also posted some batted ball and plate discipline data from both his 2021 and 2022 seasons combined. So his first 558 plate appearances in comparison to his first 32 plate appearances of this season heading into tonight's game. I can't throw this up on the screen because of the way that I'm recording tonight, unfortunately. Sorry for the inconvenience, but I'll try to read these off and hopefully you're able to keep up. So in his first 2 years, he registered a hard hit rate of 37.9%. That was at 60 heading into this game, and that's going to go up because of tonight. That's obviously inflated because of the early season. That's not always going to be 60%. That's ridiculous. So that one doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. Some of these other numbers, though, I think will kind of look similar as we go over the course of the season, like contact percentage. He's making more contact this season, 77.4% of the time compared to 73.3% in his first 2 seasons. He's also making more contact on pitches in the strike zone, 83.8% heading into tonight's game compared to 81.8% in 2021 and 2022. His zone swing rate right now, he's actually taking more pitches inside the zone at the moment, or at least heading into tonight's game, 61.7% on his zone swing rate thus far this season, compared to 69.1% in his first 2 years. He's chasing just a little bit less outside the zone. You know, the strikeout numbers have still been fairly high this year. 31.3% on the chase rate, or outside zone swing rate thus far this year, compared to 32.3% in his first 2 years. He's also taking more balls so far, 38.5% heading into tonight's game compared to 35.9% in 2021 and 2022. Whiff rate is pretty significantly down, just 10% flat compared to 12.8% in his first 2 years. Barrel percentage has been low so far this year. Entering tonight's game, he was at 5%. I'm sure that went up because, I mean, he cranked the hell out of those 2 balls tonight. I'm sure he got the barrel on those balls and that he's going to register a barrel on those balls. So that should go up from the 5%. He was at 11% in his first 2 years. Average exit velocity also significantly up heading into this game, and it's going to be a lot higher after those 170 mile per hour balls that he hit tonight. But 92.8 average exit velocity heading into tonight's game compared to an 87.1 mark in his first 2 years. So just really great stuff from Jarred Kelenic so far. That's a very small sample size to be clear, to be fair, but still just we're seeing some growth out of Kelenic, some undeniable growth out of Kelenic. And as for, you know, moving him up in the lineup, all that stuff, because I know that's been a question from you guys. For me, I'm not doing anything with Kelenic. I don't want to mess with his routine. And you are still getting some, you know, good contributions out of the top of your lineup, like Ty France, like Eugenio Suarez. Teoscar Hernandez seems to be turning things around. He was 1 for 5 today with an RBI single, but he had 3 hard hit balls. It seems like the bat's starting to turn the corner there. I just don't think that you really need to force the issue there. And I just don't want to do anything that messes with Kelenic's routine right now. I don't want to get him out of his headspace at the moment, or I don't want to do anything that risks getting him out of that headspace. I just want him to focus on what he's doing right now and focus on being him and being the best version of Jarred Kelenic that he can be right now. And we can have that discussion in a couple weeks if it's, you know, time to move him up the lineup. And they've kind of gradually moved him up the lineup. We've seen him hit, you know, 6. We've seen him, I think, hit 5 a couple times this season. So they are doing that a little bit, but I don't think that they need to do anything as drastic as moving him up 1, 2 in the lineup right now. But we'll see. If he keeps swinging it like this, yeah, we definitely do need to have that conversation. But it's also still very early on that, a couple games can happen, and then his numbers, because of how early it is and just how stats work at the beginning of the season, his numbers could, look a lot worse than they do right now in the blink of an eye. So let's just wait and see on it. But we're seeing some great stuff out of Jared right now, and it's pretty awesome. It's unfortunate that it's coincided with the one of the worst stretches so far of the early season for the Mariners. But yeah, a couple quick shout outs to Cal Raleigh and Ty France. Raleigh was 2 for 5. He was one of the guys that his at bats just kind of looked like his heart wasn't in it after the 4th inning. But the first 2 at bats that he had, a couple singles, he's hitting for some average here to start the year. 743 OPS overall to start the year, 250 average. Ty France, 3-hit game for him as well. Couple ribs. He also walked. His average is up to 346, 923 OPS. He's second on the team behind Jared Kelenic in that category. Just one hard hit ball for France tonight. I know I promised you guys that we would be hashtag positive here, but what's going on with Julio, man? Another 0 for 5 night tonight. His average is down to 241. Had a couple of hard hit balls, including one that was to start the game that was robbed by Trey Mancini. It was like 112 off the bat and resulted in an out. It was actually the hardest hit ball of the entire game between the two teams, and it was an out. But still, just seeing Julio chase a bit and not really doing any damage with the cookies that he's getting, it's just not a good time for Julio. He's not in a great spot right now. Hopefully he gets out of that sooner rather than later, because they do need him. It's not going to be every night that they get production like this out of their other guys. So they need Julio to be a driving force there, and he's just not really doing that at the moment. But overall, again, like I said, it was a pretty good night for the offense, despite how rough it looked after the blow up. A lot of this is being carried, of course, by those first 2 innings, but it's certainly a lot better than what we had seen out of this offense so far this season, or for the most part this season. So I will take it, to be sure. All right, so before we hop off of here, I want to talk a little bit about tomorrow's game, and then I'll send you on your way. It is almost 1 a.m. here as I'm trying to crawl to the finish line on this recording. Of course, this wouldn't be simple. I couldn't just record the show and go on my merry way. No, there had to be some issues with my MacBook, of course. Before we transition, though, I want to tell you folks about FanDuel. Grand slams, no-hitters, and double plays are back, and there's no better place to get on the MLB action than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because new customers get a no-sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's bonus bets back if your first bet doesn't win. Just download the FanDuel Sportsbook app. It's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, FanDuel even lets you combine your bets for a chance at a bigger payout with a same-game parlay. So don't miss the chance to get your no-sweat first bet up to $1,000 in bonus bets when you go to FanDuel.com/lockedon. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon to learn more. Make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen after the Mariners 14-9 loss to the Cubs. So the Mariners find themselves in a very disadvantageous position heading into tomorrow's series finale, which we're also planning on having a post-game show for, and Colby should be present for that one. Cubs are going to be throwing Marcus Stroman out there, and Stroman has yet to give up a run this season. Mariners will be countering with Logan Gilbert, who has seen his velocity dip in both of his starts, and pretty significantly in his last start. There was some concern, if you remember, that he was potentially hurt following that start, because he was finding his fastball in the 90 to 91 mile per hour range. But he is set to make his start tomorrow. And it's hard to feel positive heading into this game. I know I told you I was gonna try to leave you on a positive note here, but it's very hard to find the positives right now because, again, vibes are at a low right now for this team, especially after this game and after getting walked off in 2 consecutive games the 2 nights before. Morale is not going to be very high heading into this game, and then Stroman's a good pitcher. I don't expect the Mariners to score 9 runs. I hope they do, but I don't expect it. It's going to be tough for them to string together some hits off of Stroman, who doesn't give up a lot, and to actually get guys across the plate here. Gilbert's got to be good. Gilbert, we need to see. I mean, first of all, we need to see Logan Gilbert eat some innings tomorrow because this bullpen needs it, and I would assume that we're going to see at least 1, maybe 2, maybe even 3, but probably 1 or 2 at most. Relievers make their way over from Tacoma to give these guys a blow because they could really use it. This bullpen has been significantly overused over the last 3 days. They just need better support from their rotation, and they need one of their better guys here to show up. So hopefully Gilbert's velocity is back where it needs to be, and hopefully he has some feel for his secondaries. The curveball was not present at all in his last start against the Guardians. He was spiking that thing. It was not a viable offering for him. But maybe the splitter, maybe the slider, hopefully one of those, at least one of those, shows up tomorrow because, the Mariners are going to need a quality start out of Logan Gilbert, or they're probably staring down the barrel of a sweep, their first sweep on the wrong side of it this season, which would be unideal to say the least. So hoping for the best, hoping to get a win here and head back to Seattle with some sense of good vibes. It's still going to be a little bit tough to shake the nasty feeling of the last 3 games, and particularly tonight. But winning, as they say, does heal all wounds. So we'll catch you after the game tomorrow to talk about that. Hopefully we are talking about a win, because it would be nice to do one of these post-game shows without being super down in the dumps. But that's going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. I've been your host, Trident Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez. It's DaneGNZLZ. And my co-host Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. Follow us on Instagram and TikTok as well at Locked On Mariners. That's one word, Locked On Mariners. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On Fantasy Baseball. Win your league by listening to Matt and Dom every day as they bring you the best fantasy draft strategies. It's free and available wherever you get your podcast, just like us. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And with that, have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you after the game tomorrow. Peace.